He did not knock. He never knocked in his own chambers, that singular proud habit, the quiet arrogance of a man who had never been given cause to doubt his dominion over every room, every corridor, every stone of Ashford Manor, was the very thing that undid him on that cold November evening. The fire in the hearth had burned low, reduced to a trembling amber glow that barely reached the corners of the vast bedchamber. Rain lashed the mullioned windows. The wind, cruel and persistent, slipped beneath the heavy velvet drapes and sent them swaying like mourning veils. And there, in the great carved mahogany bed that had belonged to 4 generations of the Duchy of Ashford, beneath a coverlet of deep burgundy silk, was a woman. Not a maid, not a ghost, a woman. And she was, without question, the most beautiful creature that Adrian Calloway, the 8th Duke of Ashford, had ever had the misfortune to lay eyes upon. He stood in the doorway, still wearing his greatcoat, rain-darkened and glistening, his riding gloves clutched in one fist. He had ridden hard from London, cutting through the storm to escape a particular suffocation he had never found the words for, the suffocation of a life arranged by everyone but himself. And now this impossible, inexplicable vision in burgundy silk, with dark hair fanned like a raven's wing across his pillow, her chest rising and falling in the serene oblivion of deep sleep. For a long, breathless moment, the Duke of Ashford did not move. He simply stared. And in that staring, something shifted in his chest, something that had not moved in years, something he had long believed calcified, fossilized, quite thoroughly dead. He dismissed the sensation immediately. Before we go any further into this extraordinary tale, if you are new to this channel, welcome. You have found yourself in precisely the right place. Here at the Duke's Lost Letters, we bring you the grandest, most sweeping romantic stories of the Regency era every single week. If this is your first time joining us, please do take a moment to like this story and subscribe to the channel. It costs you nothing, and it means the world to us. It tells us that you wish to return, that you wish to hear more, and it helps this little community of ours grow into something truly magnificent. For those of you who are already subscribers, you are cherished, every single one. Now, let us return to the Duke and to the woman who was about to change absolutely everything. Who the devil are you? His voice, when it finally came, was not loud. It did not need to be. It was the kind of voice that commanded regiments, silenced drawing rooms, and made lesser men remember urgent appointments elsewhere. It was low, precise, and edged with something sharper than anger. The woman startled awake. She sat upright with a gasp, clutching the coverlet to her chest, her dark eyes wide and disoriented. They were extraordinary eyes, the deep, fathomless brown of river water in autumn, and in them, as she took in the sight of him standing in the doorway, a sequence of emotions moved with remarkable swiftness, confusion, recognition, and then, unmistakably, dread. "Your Grace," her voice was barely above a whisper, but it was steady. He gave her credit for that. "You have the advantage of me, madam," he said, stepping into the room, letting the door fall shut behind him. "You appear to know precisely who I am, whilst I have not the faintest idea who has taken it upon themselves to occupy my bed." She swallowed. He watched the delicate movement of her throat with a detachment he did not entirely feel. "My name is Elara Vane." The name landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. Vane. He was quite certain in that moment that the universe was possessed of a very dark and particular sense of humor. Lord Gerald Vane was, without question, the single individual on this earth that Adrian Calloway despised with the full and extraordinary capacity of his considerable soul. It was Vane who had orchestrated the destruction of Adrian's father, who had fabricated the evidence, whispered the slander, pulled the threads until the previous Duke of Ashford had been stripped of his parliamentary seat, his reputation, and ultimately, Adrian believed with bone-deep certainty, his will to live.
It was Vane who smiled at him across every London ballroom with that particular smile of a man who knows he has won. And this was Vane's daughter, in his bed. "I see," said the Duke, his voice now a study of glacial composure. "And perhaps, Miss Vane, you might be so good to explain by what extraordinary sequence of events the daughter of Lord Gerald Vane has come to be sleeping in the private bedchamber of his most devoted enemy." She lifted her chin. He noted with an irritation he could not entirely suppress that it was a very fine chin.
"I was brought here," she said, "against my will, by men I did not recognise. I've been travelling from Bath, my aunt resides there, and my carriage was stopped on the Wiltshire road. I was—" She paused. He saw the brief controlled tremor move through her before she mastered it. "I was blindfolded, brought inside, and when the blindfold was removed, I was here, alone. I was exhausted. I did not know what to do." She said it plainly, without embellishment or appeal to sentiment. No tears, no theatrical collapse. She met his gaze with those devastating dark eyes and simply told him the truth, or what appeared to be the truth, and something about the bare honesty of it disturbed him more than any performance might have. "And you expect me to believe this?" he said. "I expect nothing from you, Your Grace," she replied quietly. "I am aware of who you are to my father. I am aware that my presence here in these circumstances will appear to you as nothing more than a scheme, a trap, some machination devised by Lord Vane to further his campaign against your family. I cannot prevent you from thinking so. I can only tell you that I despise my father's methods as thoroughly as you despise the man himself, and that I would sooner walk out into that storm tonight alone and on foot than remain here to be accused of conspiracy I had no hand in." She moved to rise from the bed. She was still fully clothed, he noticed, her travelling dress of dark green wool, dusty and travel-worn, entirely unsuited to his bedchamber, but entirely consistent with her story. She stood, and she was tall for a woman, and she looked at him with an expression so composed in its dignity that he felt, quite unexpectedly, ashamed of himself. "Sit down," he said. She did not. "Miss Vane," he exhaled slowly and pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of his nose. "Sit down. I am not throwing you into a storm. Now, we're approximately 5 minutes into our story, and if you have not yet done so, please subscribe to the Duke's Lost Letters and give us a like. It helps this channel grow more than you might imagine, and we have so many more stories to share with you. Thank you, truly. Now, where were we? Oh yes, 2 enemies, one very compromising bedchamber, and a choice that the Duke had not yet realised he was going to have to make. He sent for Mrs. Pruitt, his housekeeper, a woman of unshakable discretion and the approximate emotional temperature of a sensible stone wall. He had Miss Vane moved to a guest chamber, a respectable one, not so fine as to suggest invitation, not so plain as to suggest punishment. He sent for cold supper. He sent for a maid to attend her, and then he retreated to his study, poured himself a glass of brandy he did not taste, and stared into the fire for a very long time. The situation was, he catalogued methodically, a catastrophe of the first order. If it became known, and in the country things always became known, gossip travelling with supernatural velocity through drawing rooms and servants' halls alike, that Miss Elara Vane had spent even a single night beneath his roof, the scandal would be of magnificent proportions. It would be assumed that she was his mistress, or his intended, or the subject of some dramatic abduction. Her reputation would be shredded. His name would be attached to Lord Vane's family in every rumour and gazette from here to Edinburgh. And Lord Vane himself, he could not decide whether Vane had engineered this entire incident, or whether he was merely about to exploit it with the opportunistic genius of a man born to manipulation.
He thought of her face, the steadiness of it, the way she had said, "I despise my father's methods as thoroughly as you despise the man himself." He had believed her. God help him, he had believed her. He went to her chamber at 9:30. He knocked. There was, he reflected grimly, a first time for everything. She was seated by the window when he entered, a candle burning on the sill beside her, a small book open in her lap that she closed as he came in. The maid had found her a dressing gown of pale ivory wool, and her dark hair had been loosely braided over one shoulder, and the candlelight did things to her countenance that he firmly declined to catalogue. "I wish to speak plainly," he said, taking the chair across from her without invitation. "I would prefer nothing else," she answered. He studied her for a moment. "You said you despise your father's methods. That is a considerable statement. Am I to understand that that you do not act in concert with him?" Something moved in her expression, not pain precisely, but the shadow of it, old and well practiced in concealment. "My father and I have not been in genuine accord since I was old enough to understand what he truly is," she said. "I was dispatched to my aunt in Bath 3 months ago because I refused to—" She stopped. "Because I refused something he wished of me." "What did he wish of you?" She met his gaze steadily. "He wished me to become betrothed to Viscount Hale. Lord Hale is 63 years old, Your Grace. He has buried 2 wives and is possessed of a temperament I would not inflict upon a creature I disliked. My father wished the alliance for its financial benefits to himself. When I declined, he called it rebellion. I called it self-preservation. He sent me to Bath to reconsider." "And have you reconsidered?" "No." One word, no qualification, no apology. No. Adrian Calloway looked at this woman, this strange, brave, entirely inconvenient woman, and felt something in his chest perform another of those alarming, unsolicited movements. "Miss Vane," he said carefully, "I will make inquiries tomorrow regarding the men who transported you here. I have my suspicions. Lord Vane may well have arranged this himself, intending to manufacture a scandal that would force either your compliance with his matrimonial plans or some leverage over myself, perhaps both." He paused. "In the meantime, you will remain here under Mrs. Pruitt's care. I give you my word, for whatever currency the word of your father's enemy may hold, that your honor is entirely safe in this house." She looked at him for a long, searching moment. "Why?" she asked quietly. "I beg your pardon?" "Why are you helping me? I am a Vane. Everything in your history with my family gives you reason to despise me by association, to send me away, to use this situation to your own advantage, as my father would certainly have done. Why are you not doing any of those things?" He rose from the chair and moved to the window, his back to her, looking out at the darkness and the rain. "Because," he said finally, "I have spent 15 years being the man my hatred of your father required me to be, hard, closed, unwilling to extend any grace that might be construed as weakness. I find that tonight I am very tired of that man." We are roughly 10 minutes into our story, dear listeners, and what a story it is. Before we continue, if you haven't yet subscribed to the Duke's Lost Letters, please do so now. It takes only a moment, and it ensures that you never miss a single tale. We release new stories every week, and every one of them is crafted with the same care and passion as this one. Subscribe and leave us a like. It truly makes all the difference. Now, onward, because the most extraordinary part of our story is still to come. The days that followed were peculiar. There was no other word sufficient to the situation. He sent men to the Wiltshire Road. He sent letters to London. He pursued, with the methodical intensity that was his particular genius, every thread of the mystery of Elara's abduction. And whilst he did so, she remained at Ashford Manor with the quiet, self-possessed grace of a woman who had learned long ago to occupy difficult spaces without complaint. She was entirely unlike anyone he had encountered before. She read voraciously. His library, which was considerable, delighted her in a way she made no attempt to conceal.
He came upon her one afternoon, curled in the great leather chair beside the library fire, with Plutarch's Lives open across her knee, and she looked up with an expression of such unguarded intellectual pleasure that he stopped in the doorway and forgot for a full 3 seconds what he had come for. She played the pianoforte after supper with a technical mastery that was considerably less than perfect and an emotional expressiveness that was considerably more than extraordinary. She played as though the music meant something, as though she was saying through the notes everything that her composed and careful countenance would not permit her lips to speak. And she argued with him. Not loudly, not rudely, but with a precision and a confidence that suggested she had formed her opinions by the hard work of actual thought and was not particularly interested in relinquishing them simply because he held a dukedom and a stern expression.
They disagreed memorably about the enclosure of common land. They disagreed with considerable mutual heat about the education of women. They agreed, with a surprised and mutual delight that neither of them had expected, about the poetry of Keats and the specific, ineffable tragedy of Hamlet. He began, in spite of himself, to look forward to supper. On the 5th day, his intelligence from London arrived. He read it twice, standing at his desk in the grey morning light, and then he sat down slowly and stared at the wall. Lord Vane had not arranged the abduction. The men responsible were in the employ of Viscount Hale, the 63-year-old, twice-widowed, intemperate Viscount Hale, who had, it emerged, grown impatient with Lord Vane's inability to deliver the bride he had been promised. Hale had arranged to have Elara brought to Ashford Manor specifically, knowing the scandal it would generate, intending to leave her reputation in such comprehensive ruins that she would have no alternative but to accept his suit. It was, Adrian thought, a scheme of such cold and calculating cruelty that it made him feel physically ill. He went to her immediately. He found her in the library, naturally. She rose when he entered, reading his expression with those perceptive dark eyes, and before he had said a single word, she said, very quietly, "It is bad news. It is Viscount Hale, not your father." He told her everything. He watched her receive it, saw the brief, controlled flinch, the whitening of her knuckles where her hand gripped the spine of the book she had been holding, and then the remarkable wrenching composure with which she absorbed the fact that a man she had refused had sought to destroy her for the refusal. "What will happen to me?" she asked. Her voice was calm. Only her eyes betrayed the depth of what she felt, and they were very bright. "That," said Adrian Calloway, the 8th Duke of Ashford, who have been his hatred's loyal servant for 15 years, "depends entirely upon what you wish." "What do you mean?" He took a breath. This was the place in the conversation he had been approaching for 5 days without quite knowing it, the place from which there was no measured, sensible retreat. "The scandal exists whether we created it or not. Your reputation has been compromised by Hale's design. Your father will use it to enforce the very betrothal you refused. You have, by my calculation, very few alternatives available to you." He paused. "Except one." She stared at him. "You cannot be suggesting—" "I can," he said, "and I am. Marry me." The silence in the library was absolute. The fire crackled. Outside, improbably, the rain had ceased, and pale November sunlight was falling through the tall windows across the floor between them. The news reached London by the week's end. The Duke of Ashford was to be married. His bride was the daughter of his most celebrated enemy, a union so improbable, so magnificently scandalous, so entirely against the grain of every expectation and arrangement that the gossips of Mayfair barely knew where to begin. Lord Vane received the announcement at his London club and went perfectly, satisfyingly white. Viscount Hale was invited, in terms of the most frigid legal formality, to remove himself from polite society or face consequences that the Duke's solicitors declined to specify but strongly suggested he would not enjoy. And in the library of Ashford Manor, on a grey November afternoon, the Duke of Ashford and Elara Vane sat together in companionable silence, she with Plutarch, he with the estate accounts he was too distracted to read, and the fire burned warmly, and outside the bare-branched elms stood sentinel against a clear winter sky, and for the first time in a very long time, the great old house felt less like a monument to grief and more like a place where something was just beginning. He chose her. In choosing her, he chose to put down the weight of his hatred, the cold armor of his isolation, and the long, exhausting war he had waged against a man who had tried to unmake his family. He chose, instead, the warm and improbable and entirely unexpected grace of a future he had not planned and could not have predicted. He chose her, and it was, without question, the wisest and most unexpected thing the Duke of Ashford had ever done. And so ends our story for today, dear listeners. Thank you from the very bottom of our hearts for spending this time with us here at the Duke's Lost Letters. If this story moved you, enchanted you, or made you smile in spite of yourself, then please subscribe to this channel right now and leave us a like. Share this story with someone you know who loves a beautiful romance. Every like, every subscription, every share helps us to keep crafting these stories for you, and we have so many more waiting in the wings. Scandals and secrets, lost letters and found hearts, dukes and earls, and the extraordinary women who utterly undo them. We will see you in the next one. Until then, may your life be a little more Regency and your heart a little more open to the most unexpected of choices.